As is always the case, our July conferences are devoted to advancing the cause of the dawning golden age of Saint Germain across the world and the golden age of One, which is, of course, the foreshadowing of the victory of the ascension for each and every child of the light, son and daughter of God, who will avail themselves of the opportunity. The dispensation that has been christened in this particular golden age as that focus of the ascended master's efforts and the means whereby there is the transfer of every impetus to unascended mankind is, of course, golden Helicon. Golden Helicon itself is a specialized component of the river of divine life. Your own crystal cord is a rivulet of that one life that is engendered in the heart of God in the great central sun, focused by your beloved Mighty I Am presence with its very own heart's love, and sent forth, speeding like an arrow, forth out of the great central sun, coursing through the great arcs into embodiment, the so-called descending and ascending arcs. The golden river, then, is likewise the river of life. The river of life of ascended masters and cosmic beings. A specialized, set aside gift of each one's own attainment, which they have in council agreed upon, and then have acted upon that dispensation. The Golden River is then the fused, welded at one-ment of all of the charge of ascended master consciousness of each of the individual ascended masters. Understand that it has its source far above all of the cataracts and waterfalls and broad, slowly moving rivers of the 5 realms of coming to be. It has its origin there in the heart of the great central sun. And it emerges as a mighty outpouring with all of the impetus of each of these ascended ones. And in this particular conclave, note is especially being made of the concerted effort of the lords and gods of creation, Elohim by name, who are acting jointly to produce their gift as that composite shield of the Elohim, pouring forth into manifestation. This is an exchange between the universal great central sun with its with its magnitudes that defy quantification, that almost are beyond your ability to even imagine the magnitude of the power that is concentrated there. Yet that is the task before you, to rise in your own attunement, to open the chalice of your heart and mind, and to yourself become a living electrode, or as it is sometimes called, a pillar of the sacred fire, connecting heaven and earth, a conduit across which this fused and composite stream may flow. In order that you might better rise in your own imaginative faculties and attunement faculties and your cognitive faculties, we are going to share with you this night an exercise in visualization and attunement that has been condensed for your edification by none other than our beloved Lord Mahachohan, he who is renowned for his service to life of harnessing all of the elemental forces of nature, tempering them, bridling them, and wherever possible, guiding them in constructive directions. You know him today in the stature of his offices, of the glance and the calm, God-controlled demeanor that he exhibits, as well as his exquisite, fine, precise control over all of nature, which is all under the nod of his consciousness and the outpouring of his heart's devotion. This has come about because he, like Saint Germain and all of those who are now ascended, prior to their ascensions, did the spade work that you are doing now of opening up for yourself windows into the realms of eternal being, forging pathways, even you might consider pathways made of living nerve cells of the crystal cord that are opening for you into these realms. Ideally, you should never stray far from holding in the forefront of your consciousness the awareness that whatever you might know of the great central sun of being, life, and mind, and all of those other great archetypes that it is, that each and all are under the conscious Christ command of your own individual Mighty I Am presence. Yes, the depth of the great central sun, the center, the perimeter, the vastness, the limitlessness of it, all of its resources. These are all in rapt attention to every Mighty I Am presence. And as Saint Germain has noted, the light of this limitless light knows its own and flies in service wherever it is commanded. It comes together, converging on that point where the call and the Christ command goes forth. So tonight, we paint a drama for you that is a part of the deliverance, the promise of deliverance to our world, despite all that is going on in the earth today. The elemental forces of nature, macrocosmic in scope, are themselves the direct outpouring and fashioning of the Mighty Elohim, the cosmic beings, the ascended masters, in conjunction with the great I Am. And while the tender mercies of the Brotherhood, suffer nature for a time to absorb the body blows and the various depredations that are imposed upon her. The time does come in small cycles and larger cycles when no more is permitted to be heaped upon nature. And then it is that mankind, unfortunately and tragically, are obliged to learn what it is that they have been doing and how there are consequences to the sowings of discord that they have given themselves permission to impose upon themselves, impose upon one another, and impose upon the innocence of nature herself. The Mahachohan, for many thousands of years prior to his ascension, was in contact with this interchange between the great central sun, the sun behind the sun of Helios and Vesta, the sun of even pressure, and all of those odic forces of earth and air, fire and water and akasha that weave their fabric, their tapestry of that we observe as nature out here in this world of form. When he sought to set forth an object lesson to mankind about this mechanism, he wove it into the plot and storyline of his great work, the Iliad. The Iliad had a subtitle, The Rage of Achilles. And a great deal of it had to do with the compassionate heart of the onlooking narrator, in the person of the author, Homer, lamenting the heartless, merciless behavior of both sides in that archetypal war, the Trojan War, but especially many times the out of control ravings of Achilles himself, who for all of his courage and all of his fearlessness and his strength and so forth, many times is depicted as almost frothing at the mouth with the rage against his opponents. When the Mahachohan sought to teach this lesson, which relates to Golden Helicon, as you shall shortly see, he identified what you know best as the river of life, coming forth from the source which was known as Oceanos. That would be this ocean current, which is the outbreathing, outpouring tides that flow forth out of the uncreated realms of eternal being and circle all of the realms of creation and then flow back to their original point and source in the great central sun. Out of this broad Oceanos, then, as a parent, there were born any number of rivers and streams, which were personified in any number of cases, which is not as far-fetched as it might seem when you do understand the ensouling aspect of the blessed Undines and Neptune and Loire's role in conjunction with the Undines. In this case, what Homer orchestrated was a titanic battle between a man and a god, a river god in this case. The river god traced his origin, his parentage, back to none other than Zeus, the father of gods and men. This river had two names, and I'm giving you all of this background now because when you hear the story, it will help you really grasp it. If you had lived a few thousand years ago, we wouldn't need to give you all this background. You'd know it from your mother's knee. So the river had two names. It was known by one name by the gods themselves. That name is Xanthus, spelled with an X. The same flowing stream was known by an entirely different name by the Trojans themselves, for it was a river close by their city. And that name was Scamander. This is a reference to the crystal cord. And not only the individual life stream's crystal cord, but the crystal cord of life, of the river of life that supports and sustains our world. When it comes forth from the Godhead, it is divine. It has still the full blush of eternal life and God consciousness in every particle of that river. But once it has been usurped and received by the soiled garments of the four lower bodies and stained by them with the discolorations of human thought and feeling, it no longer appears to be divine as the Xanthus was, but it has become the mundane Scamander River, which, unlike its divine parentage, which was more often hearkened near the mountain source of Mount Etna, this was near where it flattened out onto the broad plain below Troy that fed into the Hellespont. So you had this same river, Xanthus and Scamander. Now I'm going to give you the interpretation first, so that as the narration flies by, you will be able to appreciate the instruction given by beloved Homer. Essentially, what has happened at a certain episode, Achilles, in his continuing bloodlust for the death of the enemies of the Trojans, has split them into two camps, one of which retreats behind the walls of Troy, and the other is trapped at the banks of the Scamander River. And he wades into them with wholesale, as the statement is, manslaughter, and the river is dyed, frothing blood red with the issue of blood and the bloating of the corpses. And at that point, Xanthus becomes indignant and appears as a man before Achilles and says, if you want to fight the Trojans, that's fine, but take your battle out onto the dry plain and leave me alone. Achilles, being the proud war hero that he is, doesn't care that he's come up against a god, a river god, if you will, and so continues on with that and incites the ire of the river, which mounts up more and more, fed by the source coming forth from Zeus. And as it mounts up, it builds into a tidal wave, which in the roiling of the water, not only do you have silt and stones, but you have the bloated bodies of the victims of Achilles who are disgorged out of the river or ahead of the wave of the river and threaten to themselves inundate Achilles. In fact, the river Xanthus boasts that Achilles will not need to make an altar, or his brethren will not need to build a mound for his burial. The river is doing that for him. And on, back and forth, this battle goes between God and man. And sure enough, the river, pushing on, more and more lowers over Achilles and really threatens to engulf him. Then Pallas Athena appears and says, "Be of good cheer, Achilles," and then disappears again. And Achilles is still about to be drowned by the broaching of the river. And so at long last, Achilles throws out a plaintive cry, not heard by his own birth mother, who is herself a goddess, who had arranged for his armor, including the shield of Achilles, but heard by another champion, one who is really dead set in her rage against the Trojans, Hera. And Hera summons the god of fire, Hephaestus, and says to him, "Master craftsman, we cannot have our arch hero destroyed, because the Trojans will win the war if Achilles is killed at this stage. Therefore, God of fire, take charge of this contest and see that Achilles is preserved." So the god of fire gets engaged in the battle and basically burns up all of the bloated corpses and the other detritus or excess baggage of the battles and the war, and in a sense purges the river of its impurities that have caused it to rise up against Achilles. Furthermore, the heat of that god of fire threatens to evaporate the river itself. So at that point, the river god agrees to a truce, agrees to return back to his banks, because at least Achilles isn't insisting on clogging up the riverbed with more and more dead. And so Achilles in that way is preserved. You can see in this many of the principles of cosmic law at work, to where pristine nature and pristine pure life has the misqualification and the stains, in this case, the crimson red of bloodshed that tinges the pure stream. And then you see in the fullness of time that the white fire core within nature rises from within out and sloughs off what is not due to its own misqualification at all. And Achilles is the recipient of his own karma, if you will. All of those whom he had killed are about to shorten his life, because as they pile up around him, he can't breathe, he can't move, and he's about to be buried alive beneath those corpses. And then To the rescue comes the flames of transmutation, which balance and disengage that misqualification, so that the hero himself lives to fight another day, and the river goes back to its banks, content to flow within the stream bed that is arranged for it. Now, I want you to understand, once we have gone through this, hopefully your own hearts will be lifted, and you will understand that this is more than just storytelling. This is a metaphor for that which is taking place within the shield of Elohim and the fused momentum that is golden Helicon. And hopefully you will come away with the understanding that when any one of you or all of you, when you come under the collective impetus of the entire spirit of the Brotherhood of Light, that is the golden river of the Helicon, that it is more powerful than all of the mortal depredations of human thought and feeling put together. And for those who will come within the compass of that protection, of that shield, the spinning action of the disc of light of that shield, the stainless mirror of that shield, the electronic circle of that shield, you will find that the Godhead and all of these deities will tip the scales in your own confrontations with returning karma, or those things that would be imposed upon you by the world around you. That is the means whereby the Ascended Masters intend to win the victory of this golden age. So now let us enter into the consciousness of the Mahachohan, and also the consciousness, really and truly, of the Golden River. Once they reached the ford where the river runs clear, the strong, whirling Xanthus, sprung of immortal Zeus, Achilles split the Trojans in a rout, driving one half back toward the city, scattering up the plain where they stampeded off in terror. Now back in their tracks the Trojans fled pell-mell, while Hera spread dense cloud ahead to block their way. The other half were packed in the silver whirling river. Into its foaming depths they tumbled, splashing, flailing, plunging, the river roaring, the banks echoing, left and right, spinning round and round within its whirling eddies, spun like locusts that swarm up in the air, rushing fire, flitting toward a river. The tireless forest fire, scorching the locusts with hard explosive blasts of flame. So at Achilles' charge did Xanthus' swirling currents, choked with the spate of horses and men. The river roared. The more Hercules vaunted, the more the river's anger rose, churning at its heart for a way to halt his rampage, the rampage of godlike Achilles, and stop the rout of the Trojans. Zeus is stronger than rivers surging out to seas. So the breed of Zeus is stronger than any mountain stream. Here is a great river, flowing past you. Look, what help can that river give you now? This is Achilles speaking to some of his hapless victims. None. For nothing can fight the son of Kronos, Zeus by name, not even the overpowering oceans, high, huge tides, the source of all the rivers and wells and seas on earth, and all the springs and deeps alike. All flow from ocean, but even ocean shrinks from the mighty Father's lightning bolt when terrible thunder crashes down from the skies. Still more men Achilles would have killed if the swirling Xanthus had not arisen and cried out in fury, taking a man's shape, its voice breaking out of a whirlpool. Stop, Achilles! Greater than any man on earth, greater in courage, outrage too, for the gods themselves are always on your side. So even if Zeus does permit you to kill off all the Trojans, at least drive them out of my depths, out onto the flat plains. There you can perform your butchery. All my lovely rapids are now crammed with corpses. There's no channel within sight to sweep my currents out to the sacred sea. I'm choked with corpses, and still you slaughter more and more and blot them out. Leave me alone. Have done, Captain of Armies, for I am filled with horror. The breakneck runner Achilles only paused to answer. So be it, Scamander, sprung of Zeus, as you command. But I won't stop killing these overweening Trojans, not till I've packed them in their walls and tested Hector himself, strength against strength. Either he kills me or I him. Down on the Trojan front, Achilles swept like something superhuman. And now from his deep whirls, the river roared and cried to the god Apollo, "Oh, disgrace, god of the silver bow, born of Zeus! You've thrown to the winds the will of Kronos' son. Time and time, Zeus has given you strict command to stand by the Trojan ranks and save their lives till the sun goes down." When Apollo heard that, Achilles, the famous spearman, leapt down from the bluff, plunged in to the river's heart, and the river charged against Achilles, churning, surging, his rapids rising in white fury, and drove the masses of corpses, choking tight his channel, the ruck whom Achilles had killed. Scamander heaved them all up. Then bellowing like a raging bull, the river flung them out onto the dry land, while saved the remnant living, hiding them deep down in the fresh, clear pools of his thundering and whirling currents. But thrashing over Achilles' shoulders, Scamander raised a killer wave, and the tremendous thrust of it slammed against Achilles' shield. He staggered, lost his footing. His arms were flung out like trying to reach for a strong elm tree. He clung, but out it came by the roots, toppling down, ripping away the whole cliff, and blocking the stream, damming it up with a tangled snarl of branches, crashing into it full length, damming the river from bank to bank. Exactly what happens when discord has clogged the crystal cord. It is reduced to the merest little trickle of itself, blocking the stream. Bursting up from the whirlpool for breath, Achilles dashed for the flat plains, his feet flying in terror. But the great god Xanthus would not let up and continued hurling against him, Scamander looming into a murderous breaker, darkly looming over Achilles, dead set on stopping the brilliant Achilles' rampage then and there, and thrusting wholesale disaster off of the struggling Trojan forces. But the hero Achilles sprang away, far as a hard-flung spear, swooping fast as the black eagle, as a fierce marauder, both the strongest and swiftest bird that flies the sky. On he streaked, and the bronze rang out from his chest, clashing grimly. Slipping out from under the wave, Achilles fled with the river rolling on behind him, roaring huge. And now here you get another wonderful allusion to the fusing of golden Helicon. So this is an eye picture, a little interlude in all of the gore from Homer that he is very famous for. He paints these bucolic word pictures. As a farmhand will run a ditch from a dark spring, sluicing the gushing stream through plants and gardens, swinging his mattock to knock the clods out, so down the chute the water rushes on, tearing the pebbles loose, and what began as a mere trickle hits a quick slope, and down it goes, outstripping even the farmhand who guides it. So too did the relentless tide keep overtaking Achilles. For all his speed, gods are stronger than men. Again and again, brilliant, swift Achilles whirled, trying to make a stand against and fight the river man to man, and see if all the immortal gods who rule the vaulting skies were bent upon him and putting him to rout. Again and again and again, the mighty crest of the river, fed by the rains of Zeus, came battering down upon his shoulders. Down, down from high above. But Achilles kept on leaping, desperate now as the river kept dragging down his knees, lunging, cutting underneath the ground out from under his legs. He groaned, scanned the arching sky, and cried out, "Father Zeus, to think in all my misery, not one god can bring himself to rescue me from this river. I'd face any fate. No god on high, none is so much to blame as is my own dear mother, for how she lied to me and beguiled me and promised me that I would die in glory beneath the walls of armored Trojans, not to be cut down by any but Apollo's whipping arrow. Now I wish that Hector had killed me. He's the best bred man in Troy, a hero too, the man whose corpse he stripped. Now look what a wretched death I'm doomed to suffer, trapped in this monstrous river like some boy, some pig boy, swept away, who drowned trying to ford a winter torrent in a storm." Achilles rampaged on, raging against the god's strong command, driving him down the plain where the river flooded now, an immense cresting outrush bursting with burnished gear, and troops of the battle dead, the men whom he had cut down in their prime, all these corpses rolling round about him. But Achilles surged on too with high, hurtling strides, charging against the river, breakneck on, nor could the river end the battle. Not for all its reach and tidal race, not with Athena pumping enormous strength deep down into Achilles' heart. But Xanthus would not slack his fury either. Xanthus raged on at Achilles all the more, and marshaled a mountainous ridge of water, roaring out, calling out to his brother river, Simwa, "Dear brother, rise now, both of us shall rush together and halt this mortal's onslaught. At any moment, if we don't, he'll storm King Priam's mighty stronghold. The Trojans can't stand up to this man in battle. Therefore, let's beat him back quickly. Deluge all your channels from all your gushing springs. Muster all your torrents. Raise up a tremendous wave, rumbling, booming with timber, boulders crashing. And we together will stop this wild man in his tracks. We shall lord it over his power, even though he rage as if a god. Neither his strength nor splendid build will save him. Not now, I tell you, not all that glorious armor. Somewhere under our floods that gear will sink, immersed in slime and mud. And I'll roil his body round in sand and gravel and heave tons of silt, so that his brother and sister Achaeans will never know where to find his bones or collect them. I myself shall bury that man so deep in mud and rocks that it shall be his grave mound, raised by me, piled high, with no need for the world to raise a funeral barrow for him. So vaunted Xanthus, rearing against Achilles, seething, heaving up in fury, thundering out now in foam and blood and corpses. The blooded crest of the river, swelled by Zeus, came arching higher, ready to tear Achilles down. At the very last moment then, Hera, stricken with fear for Achilles, screamed out, dreading that he might be swept away by the giant churning river god, and quickly cried to the god of fire, her own dear son, "To arms, my child, god of crooked legs. You're the one we'd thought a worthy match for the whirling river Xanthus. Quick, to the rescue of Achilles. Explode in a burst of fire. I'll drive the west and south winds white with clouds and sweep in from the open seas a tearing gale to sear the Trojan bodies and gear and spread and fuel your lethal flames. And you make for the Xanthus banks and burn up the trees, and hurl the muddied stream into the conflagration. Do not hesitate for a moment, nor let him turn you with his winning words or threats. Do not abate the fierceness of your burning, not till I loose you by my command. Only then shall you halt your withering fire." Hera's command, and Hephaestus launched his inhuman blaze. First he shot into flames and burned the plain, igniting the corpses, the hordes of corpses, the squads whom Achilles had slaughtered. He scorched pure the whole plain, and the shining river shrank back. Just as when the autumn north wind hits a leveled field, trenched in a downpour, and quickly dries it off, just as the farmer is glad and starts to till his soil, so did the whole plain suddenly become parched as the god of fire devoured all the dead. Then, blazing in all his glory, feared and headed straight for the river, an inferno. The elms on the banks burned, the willows, the tamarisks, the lotus, the galingale, the reeds and rushes, and everything that lived and flourished along the river's running banks was burned by the gasp of the master smith Hephaestus' blast. And then the river's strength gave out. He panted the god's name. This is Xanthus speaking. "Hephaestus, stop. No god can stand against you, no, not I. I can't fight such fire, such fury. Arrest your attack. Brilliant Achilles, he can drive them out. What's this war to me anyway? Why should I help Troy?" So did Xanthus scream in flames, his clear torrents bubbling up like a cauldron, whipped by the crackling fire as it melts the lard of a fat sacrifice. Xanthus' clear currents seethed and lost all will to flow, and he arrested and stopped, overwhelmed by the torrid blast of the master craftsman, the god of fire. And then did Xanthus cry out to Hera, pouring out his very heart in a flood of supplication. "O Hera, why? Why does your son attack me and whip my waters more than any others? What have I done to you? Nothing beside these other powers, all who rush to defend the Trojan armies. If that is your command, I'll stop. But let your son, the god of fire, stop too. I'll swear, what's more, never to drive the fatal day away from the Trojans, not even when all Troy burns in the rampling flames, when the warring sons of Greece burn her down." Thus Hera heard Xanthus, and the radiant white-armed goddess cried to the god of fire, her own dear son, "Hephaestus, stop! Stop, my glorious blazing boy! It's not right to batter another deathless god, not for the sake of mere mortals." She ceased, and the god of fire quenched his grim blaze, and back into its channels returned the river's glistening tides. And now, with the strength of Xanthus beaten back, the two, Achilles and the river, called a truce to their battle. A cautionary tale of how important it is to safeguard Xanthus, the crystal cord energy, the life of your own beloved Mighty I Am presence individually, and these broad rivers and outpourings of liquid light that water the entire four lower bodies of this world. When need be, these elemental forces of nature are certainly under the fingertip God control of all of the Elohim and archangels and ascended masters. And in great and small ways, there can be the application of the right treatment by those elemental forces to safeguard the divine plan for the unfolding of the dawning golden age. Needless to say, in this demonstration of the power of the sacred fire over the impurities in the river of life, you have the analog of the violet transmuting flame. And you have the object lesson of how when transmutation restores purity, that nature, symbolized by Xanthus, no longer is the opponent of the sons and daughters of God, but actually flows within its prescribed banks according to how it is to be guided along. This action basically is one that was taking place here in this outer world of form. Now, let us make the affirmation together, I am here and I am there. Let us find ourselves occupying and sharing the consciousness of our own electronic body. Let us look about and realize that the extent of the amness of our I am is all-encompassing of everything that is there within that realm of the great central sun. Let us realize symbolically that for our purposes, these 12 mighty Elohim and their divine complement are all stationed in their appropriate places within that great central sun. And by dispensation of the lords of karma and the cosmic councils, the action is to take place for the streaming of dawning golden Helicon. I'd like to make an analogous example for you, just as this is to apply to the golden age, the dawning golden age of Saint Germain as it relates to the whole world, so too it can relate to the individualization of one son or daughter of God. There's a wonderful example described by beloved Saint Germain that relates directly to how you should understand the service of these 12 mighty Elohim and their divine complements in relationship to you and in relationship to the earth. It has to do with the final, last moments of initiation for one son of God, Daniel Rayborn. In this depiction, you will not have rehearsed all of the preparations that made possible this last final example. There was a great deal, months and years, and even embodiments of preparation for this final initiation to take place. But nonetheless, it is an analog to this shield of Elohim. We, at 11 o'clock at night, we were escorted into the electrical chamber, where the atomic accelerator was waiting to receive another of God's children and send that one forth into his eternal freedom, a son of light, a true image and likeness of the mighty I Am presence. As we entered the electrical chamber, the light within it was intense, holding tiny points of more dazzling light darting to and fro throughout the atmosphere continually. The one to ascend, Daniel Rayborn, seated himself regally within the chair, and those present, 24 in number, formed a circle round about the accelerator. Saint Germain positioned himself directly behind Daniel and positioned me directly in front. In addition to the 24, his ascended twin flame Nada stood within that circle of masters. When all were in readiness, Saint Germain commanded the individual attention of each of the 24 be held steadfast upon the presence and supremacy of the I Am. Suddenly, like a flash of lightning, a circle of the most intense and dazzling light surrounded us all, drawing steadily toward the chair, until that circle was 10 feet across. I might tell you that that circle is coming from everywhere. It is a truism that the light knows its own and rushes to serve its own. And so as it comes in equally from everywhere, as it approaches, it becomes a concentrated circle of light. The light within the ascension chair, accelerating within Daniel Rayborn, also expanded, and went forth in a smaller circle and blended with the outer circle of light. As these two circles became one, Daniel Rayborn began to rise slowly to a distance of about his own height above the accelerator, the light within him continuing to increase. Nada rose also and drew toward him, passing within the smaller circle. They met for a moment in a divine embrace, and then, as they looked upward, the great ray of intense white light descended, enveloping them both in its protecting radiance. blessing their glorious union and removing them from our sight. They themselves passing beyond all care and limitation into their eternal perfection of eternal being, clothed in bodies of immortal endurance and everlasting light. The electronic body as a robe of immortality, shining brighter than the sun at noonday. When those currents are to come down, they must be guided and guarded. And they are very, very powerful, and they need that directing intelligence and that attainment of those standing in for the 12 mighty Elohim and the 12 archangels, who are then actually producing this action of the light being brought to a focal point where it is able to expand within the white fire core of each atom and cell of the body and raise that up into the ascension. That is the same action that is taking place here. There is that guiding and guarding of the light coming together. In addition to the twin rays, the divine complements of the Elohim, you see those rays of their selfhood converging at that point of center, and then birthing the symbol of glorious golden Helicon. Once that stage of the action is complete, there is another part of the process that takes place, which is another phase following this stage as it is shown on the shield. This is the action of the outpouring, exiting the realm of eternal being and coming into the realms of creation. The flowing forth of Xanthus, not the river Xanthus as it was in the Iliad, but the flowing forth of the golden river of the Helicon. The way in which this process happens is quite involved, but a few of the things that are involved in it is that you'll notice from each of the 24, there is that radiance that goes to the center of the circles, the concentric rings and circles. As they go together, where they intersect and converge, there is a spinning action. And in that spinning action, they are fused together and they are made one. That is the welding of the momentums of not only those 24, but of all who contribute the gifts of the gods for the golden age. And that spinning action fashions out of itself a blended, fused momentum that then, using the impetus that has brought it together, as it has come together, once it flows together, it is then shot forth, catapulted forth, and goes forth as this sluicing of the substance of the golden age to be. This fused momentum and holds this concentrated focus of all of these Elohim. It is really and truly, there are many mysteries involved in this process. On the one hand, there absolutely is a necessity to exert God control on the part of all of these beings. And that is what is meant by the cosmic Christ command. Each of the currents, the raw power of Hercules, the wisdom flame of Apollo, the blossoming of love of Eros and Amora, the purity ray, all of these have to be under Christ's command. And that requires conscious direction, because the forces that are being worked with are much like the boisterous river Xanthus or Scamander. They are like those horses, those wild stallions or mares that are depicted in the Godhead Charioteer. They must be bridled. And these are the forces that, once they come into manifestation, they behave like gravity or electromagnetism, static electricity, the strong and weak nuclear forces. All of these are forces that have been focused by individualizations of the Godhead and are under the absolute guidance of them. Two things which are intuitively would seem to be mutually exclusive of one another are both present in this process that takes place, both by your Mighty I Am presence and by the Elohim. On the one hand, there is this volume of power that virtually defies quantification. It is so limitless in its magnitude. The power of a Niagara, the power of the nuclear furnaces that burn in the heart of the sun of Helios and Vesta. These forces are of immense power. And yet, for all of that power, which they are, the I Am presence is even more powerful. The I Am presence is as the individualization of the one and the good, is the part of life that is in charge of commanding these forces. And that command is exercised by the threefold flame. Some of you may have wondered in the past why it is that there is this law of actaves. Why free will? Why is it that the threefold flame should have such sovereignty for itself in each of the planes of manifestation? And it was revealed to us that it is because the very mechanism of the threefold flame within you is the very mechanism of the threefold flame within Hercules, or Apollo, or Astrea, or Cyclopeia. And the threefold flame within them must be in charge and must have absolute God control over the forces that are to go forth when those forces are loosed. So there is, just as in that example of Daniel Rayborn, there is the guiding and the guarding of those currents to do just exactly what they're supposed to do and not be destructive because they are not guided properly or completely. So that is taking place. There is this immensity of power and flow for each of those. But at the same time, it is all being done by individualizations of the Godhead that are of greater authority than the currents that they wield. And so for the I Am presences, the Elohim, the Ascended Masters, and for your mighty I Am presence, the process is without strain or stress. In fact, it must be, even if you are to emulate, begin to practice it yourself, you too must use it without the slightest strain or stress. It has to be done with relaxation. For all of that power, it has to be done by sattva, by that golden plume of wisdom that is the bridle that guides these forces. So these are guided by all of these beings, all 12, and all of the Brotherhood of Light. Before it goes forth, as Plato has described to you, and as we have reminded you again and again, they first look into the heart of the great I Am. They first looked within the innermost white fire core of the realm of eternal being. And they pay attention to and register the patterns of perfection that are there within the heart of God Almighty, the heart of the great I Am. And by paying attention to that pattern, they ingest those patterns within themselves. They become those very patterns. The quality of the current flowing through them takes on the tincture of those patterns. And then that is what flows forth. This is something that the Brotherhood has trained its anointed representatives to observe. It is a service that is performed by the 12 mighty Elohim, and it is performed by the holy Kumaras in their great temple in the heart of the great central sun. All of them look upon the changeless perfection of the divine paradigm there in the heart of the great central sun. They all feed their life first into it, have that divine coloring qualify their immortal life, and then having qualified it thusly, they pour it, they then blend together each their virtue, each of the attributes of these Elohim. It goes, and then like you would take individual, you know how a garment of cotton starts out? It starts out as formless little tufts of fibers on a plant, little cumulus cloud-like tufts of cotton fibers. These are carded to remove the impurities and the seeds and shells and so forth. And then those are woven into little filigree threads. And then many of those threads are elongated, put together, and then they are put into another type of machine where dozens of these threads are all fed in, and they are spun together to make a stronger, more resilient thread that is itself made up of many finer threads. And then those threads get woven into the tapestry, the warp and woof of the fabric. In the case of our world, what we have is the Brotherhood of Light looking upon the pattern of perfection which we covered last evening of your own electronic body. They look upon that pattern, and that is what is the paradigm for them as they stand round about your presence, holding the focus for your victory, as they did for Daniel Rayborn. There is another pattern for Regulus, that facet of within the heart and mind of the great I Am, which is the counterpart, the changeless, eternal, ideal world, earth, if you will, as it has been known and conceived in the heart and mind of God. The Elohim look upon that, feed their life into it, each contributing the 7 rays, the 5 secret rays, all feeding into that, which is what is happening here, is that all coming together. And then the fused momentum, the blended one-ment of all of those momentums, of these 24, and of all the members of the entire spirit of the Brotherhood of Light ascended who are part of this dispensation, all are that fused momentum that comes together and issues forth out of the great central sun and is held steadfastly with the 5th secret ray of constancy. It is held steadfastly for however long it will take until there is the transfiguration of that Regulus, until there is the resurrection of that Regulus, and until there is the ascension of that Regulus earth when she becomes freedom's star. That is the resolve of the Brotherhood. And now is a time between the action of the Kumaras and others in the great secret love star dispensation and the dispensation of Golden Helicon, when all of that is coming forth. It is thought pressure of the mind of God. It is desire pressure of the love of God. It is the will pressure of the power and the will of God. Each of these focusing these major components and all of the other sharps and flats, majors and minor, all that make up the chord of creation, the anthem of creation, all of those are fused together. And all of that is offered to you as streaming Golden Helicon. So if you receive a little rivulet of that, you may know that Hercules' momentum is fused in there. Arcturus's momentum is fused in there. Purity's momentum. And yes, Cyclopea's momentum. And in this case, Cyclopea's momentum is where Cyclopea and Virginia, with that virgin eye, that immaculate vision, looking upon that pattern of perfection, they have brought together all of the preceding rays and caused it to go forth as a rhythmic, concentrated focalization of that, brought to a pinpoint of concentration for the purpose of driving it forth into manifestation, causing it to come forth into the world of manifestation. It's perfect in the nirvanic, it's perfect in the Buddhic, and it is perfect in the white fire core of the mental, the emotional, and the physical. The Buddhic web of this Regulus is there in all of those other tanmatras and those other realms, symbolized by the earth that is at the bottom, which is the visualization that you can now embrace. And the goal is for you to realize in your own way, as you are the Achilles of your drama, you too may cry to the God of heaven and have them fly to your aid and have the impetus of their momentum like the wind in your sail, the wind at your back, the pressure of their mind. And in that way, you will be an original thinker. You will not be simply mimicking or reprocessing the thoughts of other human beings. You will not find that your own mind is overwhelmed by those thoughts. You will not find that the riptides of human emotion overwhelm your emotion. You will not find that in the passage of time that you tire of the path or get bored with it, but that you will have the constancy of this momentum rhythmically marching in 4/4 time or 3/4 time, beating with this pattern as all of heaven conspires to stand round about you and stand round about this planet, and against all odds bring it forth into the dawning golden age. Had we the time, which we will do before the fortnight is out, we'll revisit the music that was used for Apollo. It has the message of this fusing of the substance of the golden age to be, this fusing of all of those momentums. It took its inspiration from the glorious musings of the beloved Saint Germain of Shakespeare when he talked about Saint Crispin's day and how pitted against overwhelming odds, the few with Henry V stood against those odds, and he spoke those immortal words, "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers." Well, we together with this Brotherhood of Light, bound with them, knit heart to heart with them, taking advantage of this fused sluicing of the substance of the golden age to be, which is pouring forth, not destructively, not merely as a reversing of the tide of karma that other people might experience the return of their karma, but nonetheless like an avalanche of light coming down, displacing all before it, and holding to that vision of the golden age that is to come to be. You might think that this is a tall order, and you might think that it is for some other more heroic life stream than your own. You might not think that the stuff of greatness is in you, but it is certainly in your Mighty I Am presence. And the historical fact is that the Godhead charioteer of your Mighty I Am presence has been coming back, and it will keep coming back until it wins that victory. It is dogged in that God determination to take dominion over lesser states of karma and to exert its office as God individualized over the elemental forces of earth and air and fire and water. So if you will you stand and let us give together in the spirit of this shield of Elohim now the golden river. Now all the Godhead charioteers are on fire. to bathe their spirits in the virgin spring. Now rings out dispensation from the highest. Release the golden river, stream dauntless faith, breathe brightest hope, and loose the boundless oceans of God's love. Now, all ye gods of heaven, fuse your light rays, sluice the substance of the golden age to be. Now flood resplendent Helicon, anointing all who welcome thee. And do thou by thy streaming make them one with our blessed victory. Now shout the conscious cosmic Christ command, I am, I am, I am, I am. Now take dominion, golden light, bear witness my decree. By fiat of my presence I am henceforth master of my destiny. Now work thy magic, golden river, and electrify my world. Perfect my thought, make glad my heart, fix word and deed in peace. Now dawn, beloved Helicon, and lift my heart to day star's piercing sun. By heaven's holy compact thus compacted, fasten thy glory here. Melt the elements with refiner's fire, and by thy solar breath resurrect each cup and facet of my orbit into absolute perfection. Now all the torchbearers of the temple cry affirmation, vowed to the golden age of Saint Germain. Now one and all we wield thy ipse dixit, boldly to speak, proudly to live, joyfully to embrace thy every word, and fearlessly to strive the upward path to its very summit, lit by the sun of thy never-failing presence. Now, muses, fling wide your Helicon, the mighty labor is begun. Now all creation leaps to greet that golden presence, bows before the royal diadem, and unbidden yields her bounty. Now, Vestal maidens, grace this orphan globe with thy incandescent song, calling firstborn son to noble concourse with the gods. Now all the Godhead charioteers shout for joy, to see, to taste, to almost touch their long envisioned mastery. Now no sacrifice too great, no labor too long-suffering, no turning back. Now ever onward, ever upward to ascension's crowning victory. Now wait no more, eternal now. Now this our decree. Now is thine only hour. Now light, now life, now love. Now causeless cause triumphant. Now time and spaceless one. Here and now.